H.P. Lovecraft is considered one of the greatest horror writers of all time. His creation of eldritch horror is a unique introduction into the fear of the unknown, and still creates an unease in the readers' minds about how small and insignificant they are. Despite his work being recognised as some of the greatest horror writing ever, many of his stories have not been adapted into the medium of film. Those adaptations are often seen as poor and at best B-movies to which mass audiences are unlikely to see or even care for. Most adaptations simply borrow from his work and use the eldritch iconography, that of which he introduced as an author. One famous attempt to adapt a work of Lovecraft to the big screen was that of the novella At the Mountains of Madness. Director Guillermo Del Toro has expressed his keen interest in Lovecraft and has made it his mission to adapt the story into a motion picture. Del Toro had collaborated on an adaptation of the project with writer Matthew Robbins as early as 2006. After taking the screenplay to many of the Hollywood studios back then, no one seemed keen to bankroll this adaptation. It was shelved for many years and is brought up again and again every so often by the director. Del Toro certainly has a great filmography that would allow many to have the confidence in a vision of bringing the Lovecraft story to the big screen. If anyone can create an adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness, it would be Del Toro. It was actually in 2010 where the project began to pick up some steam.
So what is next on your plate?
We are trying as hard as we can to get At the Mountains of Madness produced, based on the H.P. Lovecraft book. It's being produced by Jim Cameron. It's a huge adventure thriller, a movie I've been trying to do actively for 13 years, and in my mind since I was 11 or 12.
Despite the progress of getting a green light from Universal, things slowed down. James Cameron, friend of Del Toro, and coming off the success of Avatar, was to be a producer on the project. He also allegedly offered up part of his own money in order to get the film made. It also looked like Tom Cruise was going to star in the leading role and was said to be very keen. Other actors for the lead role considered by the studio were Chris Pine and James McAvoy. Reportedly, Del Toro wanted a budget of $150 million to make the movie. This was very hard for a studio to justify. Del Toro was keen to have the movie rated R, but the studio would be more confident greenlighting the project if they went for a PG-13 rating. Del Toro, however, did not want to compromise on his vision for the picture and ultimately decided to take his project elsewhere. Del Toro then took his project to 20th Century Fox in the hopes of getting it made. However, it was shot down because of Ridley Scott's movie Prometheus. At the same time Del Toro went to Fox with his project, Prometheus was in production. Prometheus does borrow a huge amount from the Lovecraft novella At the Mountains of Madness. Some would even say it was a pretty close adaptation to the novella itself. Del Toro commented on this, stating the following: "Both films would have the same premise, scenes that would be almost identical, both movies seem to share identical set pieces, and the exact same big revelation at the end. I won't spoil it." It is clear that Prometheus crushed his hopes of making the movie around that time, despite how close he was to starting production. It was even reported that Del Toro had begun scouting locations for the film in Alaska and Greenland. He was so close. He is still keen to make the film, and now that a few years have passed since the release of Prometheus, maybe now is the time to resurrect to the project. There is a place for high-budget, non-mainstream movies to get made. Streaming services such as Netflix are contributing to the medium and high-budget films that studios are passing on. Most big studios will only fund projects that are existing properties. Heck, the film industry is dominated by comic book movie adaptations and other existing properties that are guaranteed to have an audience. I will point out that Guillermo Del Toro is currently working with Netflix to produce his darker adaptation of the Pinocchio story, so if that is a success, maybe Netflix could fund his adaptation of the Lovecraft novella. The problem the studios had was seeing a return on such a high investment. Netflix doesn't appear to have that problem. Netflix prides themselves on creating content and showing no signs of slowing down. Big budget films like Bright and The Irishman were exclusively funded by the streaming service. In particular, with The Irishman, Martin Scorsese couldn't get funding from any studio to make his dream project. It wasn't until Netflix came along and saved his project. Del Toro still has the concept art he created for the project, and plenty of pre-production material to show off. The director said this a few years back. "One day I'll show you the art. I'll show you everything we did. We did over 300 pieces of art. We did storyboards, we did models, we had a whole presentation. You will cry. You will go, why?" Guillermo Del Toro has revealed how much he is committed to eventually making this project a reality. He vows to getting the project made, and it appears to be his lifelong goal. He even wears a Miskatonic University ring, a fictional university that Lovecraft created in his stories. Del Toro wears it as a reminder of the project, and vows he will only take the ring off once he has completed the movie. Del Toro has even suggested that he may in fact be buried with this ring. However, this shows his resolve to get the project off the ground. Would you like to see Guillermo Del Toro's adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness? Let me know in the comments below. Please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to click the bell icon to receive notifications for my latest videos. Thanks for tuning in.